Representative Wright, House Bill 633 by Representative Wright. Before we start, we're going to ask staff read the instrument into record.
House Bill 633 by Representative Wright provides relative to ignition interlock devices and maintenance services.
Thank you. Representative Wright, please proceed with your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, committee. Today, here to talk to you with a number of other parties about passing HB 633. First off, Louisiana has very high rates of alcohol-related road fatalities, and the deaths are clearly 100% preventable. Everybody has driven when perhaps they shouldn't at times, but the average, the FBI's numbers suggest that for every one DWI, you've driven 80 times over the limit. So today we bring a common sense bill. It's sponsored by Mothers Against Drunk Driving. It's got a proven record of reducing DWI recidivism by 25 to 30%. It's got a proven record of reducing DWI recidivism in 25 to 30 other states that have done the similar policy. It helps consumers by reducing the cost of DWI compliance when you're on a public assistance. It cuts it by half, and the interlock industry pays for it. It helps reform behaviors using data-driven solutions, so you only get one DWI. And it holds the industry accountable. It makes those that produce interlock devices use new technology, more frequent calibration, and enforcement of standards. What I'd like to do is, Mr. Chair, is we have a few others joining us. If I might have them speak as part of the presentation, then move on. Is that okay? Thank you.
No problem. Please state your name for the record.
Michael Edgar, a retired lieutenant with Louisiana State Police, currently working with my own consulting firm, helping out MAD and the Coalition of Ignition Interlock Manufacturers with this legislation. And I'm currently, like I said, helping them. Previously, for the last 5 years, I was actually the OIC of the section of the state police that will regulate this industry if this bill should pass, and have been working on this particular legislation very intimately for the last probably 6 years. 6 years now. By researching not only by myself, but with the assistance of many other states, some of them the best of the best, and all of them have come down here or worked with us via phone or email, along with all the major manufacturers. So this was a cooperative effort between lots of people and looking at many states' statutes to formulate the best program. And it's so big because it tackles everything at once. Because what we're lacking here in Louisiana is any type of defined regulation. Right now, we have a program that's been here since 1992. So for 30 years, we have 7 manufacturers working here in the state of Louisiana. None of them have been certified other than to collect paperwork, insurance, documents from other labs, and things like that. They have approximately 106 vendor sites that have never been inspected, not once. Best practices suggest that those sites, all of those sites, should be inspected no less than 2 times a year, and we have not been into one of them ever for 30 years. So we really don't know what their practices are. We don't know who's doing business. Part of this bill tackles that. It defines what is going to be expected of all those manufacturers, all the way down to the smallest technician. It defines what the state police's role is going to be in regulating those manufacturers and those vendors. It defines how they are going to be funded, right? Because the manufacturers are going to provide the funding source for those regulators. And from what I understand, the state police is looking very similar to the model that I had created when I was there. At least one supervisor, designated supervisor, and at least one in each region, one trooper in each region. But I think they're going to try to get a couple more to rove around for a total of maybe 5 or 6 is what they're going for. And so by regulating that industry, right? If you got to understand, each manufacturer has a web portal. So each client that has to have one of these things is identified in their web portals, right? So if the company is Smart Start, so each one of their clients is in their website, and if I have a trooper assigned to the northern region, Region 3, he's going to have that same list of clientele for each one of the 7 manufacturers. And what I envisioned was those people will now be able to use that data and to work with the DA's probation, the state probation, whoever is responsible for making sure that these people actually do the program. The troopers will be working hand in hand with them and will see the exact data. They'll know every time that car was started, whether or not it was started successfully or not. They will know whether or not those people failed to do a rolling retest, whether or not they actually failed a rolling retest, whether or not someone tried to circumvent the instrument by having someone else blow in it or removed the headset, because all these things are recorded in these programs by the instrument. And right now, we have none of that. Although the technology exists, no one's watching. No one. Basically, someone is assigned for whatever reason. Say if it's a judge assigns it upon conviction, says, okay, part of your probation is going to be 6 months with ignition interlock. All they have to do is prove that they get it, wait 6 months, get it off. That's it. No one knows whether or not they have successfully done anything. They could literally put it in a old car, leave it in the driveway, and drive a different car and never start that car. No one's watching. No one's checking whether or not that car is being utilized. And that's one of the things the regulators will do. Each client, like I said, all that data. So if they go in, they look up Bob Smith. All right, I got to check on Bob. They look up Bob. Bob's last 30 days, Bob's had 2 starts on his car. Well, I know he's working. I think I need to call Bob up. And so they will actually reach out to those people and talk with them about, look, we see that you've only used this car twice. What's going on? Why are you going to work? Or you been at home? Find out what the story is, and then let them know. You're basically putting them on notice. We're watching to make sure that you are successfully navigating this program. Because like Representative Wright said, in those states that have these robust programs, there's a 30 to 70% reduction in recidivism. The idea is one person gets 1 DWI. That's it. Because I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. It's not a fun thing to have in their car. It's going to be a pain in the rear for them to have it. They're going to have to, every time they get in the car, they're going to have to blow in their car. Every 10 to 45 minutes randomly during their whole trip, they're going to have to blow into that instrument, right? And what the research shows is it changes behaviors. These people don't want to get another DWI. They don't want to have to go through this again, right? A big part of this, and I've heard through the other legislation today, is the constituents and putting them to a position to where you're not affecting their lives. What this bill does is it takes out all those mandatory suspension times, all of them. So even on the second of offense, on a high BAC, where there's a 4-year suspension and a mandatory 45-day suspension time, you can't waive it. This takes that out. Immediately you get ignition interlock, you're immediately driving. Same thing on a third or subsequent, which we hope they don't ever get to, takes out those mandatory suspension times. No more 12-month mandatory suspension time. You immediately get your driver's license back with an ignition interlock. And it also includes, it's going to include every violation. The most impact is going to be with those individuals who get that first offense. They're also going to be the ones who are going to have this device for the least amount of time, as long as they're successful. Because all the data shows that it usually takes somewhere between 6 and 8 months for someone to get used to being actually monitored. Those with the most problems. Someone who is an alcoholic, who just can't help themselves, who are going to get behind the wheel and drive, or drink and get behind the wheel. It takes them 6 to 8 months, and we're going to be able to identify those people. We're going to actually have data the first time. And I can tell you from my experience, like I said, the last 5 years of my career, I did it at headquarters with the applied technology. The 20 years prior to that, I was on the road arresting drunks. Lots of them. Lots of them. Several times, the same ones. Same ones. And I rose from the rank from trooper to lieutenant while at the road. So I spent many a night looking for drunks and helping my guys with drunks. So what we were doing, it's not working. All we're doing right now is just running them through a mill. We arrest them. We used to book them. Now you APHIS them. They process the paperwork. A couple months later, they're going to go. They're going to either go into a pretrial deferment program, or they're going to go and they're going to get an Article 893, Article 894. It's just a mill. I've literally heard people waiting for a ride because, like I said, we don't book them anymore. Or didn't for a while. I've seen a multiple offender sitting on the couch in the lobby at Troop D in Lake Charles tell a young lady, a college student who is her first time, "Don't worry about it, honey. This will be over in a couple of months. They're going to give you a pretrial deferment your first time." He was bragging about it being his multiple time over so many years. And just no fear, no worries whatsoever, because it's just a mill where we're collecting fines, we're collecting fees, and we're not making a difference. This legislation will make that difference.
Members, if I might just sort of clarify a couple of key provisions, obviously before, happy to take questions. First off, it changes blood alcohol threshold from 0.2 to 0.15. It requires 180 days minimum period on the first offense. It gives credit for time served on interlock in pretrial bond and probation conditions, but it eliminates the hard suspension, the current hard suspension with an optional interlock term. So, as was mentioned, instead of having the license suspended, they have the option to continue to drop to work or whatever the case may be, church, whatever we want to call it. They're doing with the interlock instead of having it suspended. It has a compliance-based removal and extended time for violations, and I'll leave it at that then, Mr. Chair.
Do we have any questions? Representative Gadberry.
I thought the blood alcohol, thank you, Mr. Chairman, I thought the blood alcohol content was 0.08. It's not?
I think that is when the attempt to start the interlock rate.
No, 0.08 is the illegal per se. What this bill changes is right now the enhanced time periods for having an ignition interlock, the 2 and the 4 years, is now at a 0.20. Across the nation, all the states have gone to a 0.15. This will put us in line with best practices, because a big part of what this bill does is put us in those best practices in line with the federal government, because right now our lack of doing these things is costing our Department of Transportation and Development millions of dollars in roads and bridge money.
Okay, so if they get a DWI and then they apply for a hardship license, they still get this interlock device on their vehicle?
Correct.
So they're not getting away from that?
Correct.
They may get their license back, hardship license,
Get a
but they
restricted
still
driver's
got the...
license. Right, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Representative Edmondson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Who regulates this now?
Well, like
I
I
mean,
said,
you said it's like so loosely regulated.
right. It's Office of State Police regulates it. Still the same agency that's going to do it, and the same unit that's going to do it. However, there's no. The only thing they do is collect insurance once a year, and if the manufacturers have a new device they want to introduce, they just send them basically a user's manual, and Element Labs is the independent lab most of them use. They'll send them a lab report, saying that they meet its specs, and that's pretty much the end of it.
And how will this change that?
Oh,
Can you just tell me?
Oh,
I
yes,
mean, I know that's what you've been talking about all this time, but if you could just tell me in your own words how this would change that.
oh yes, ma'am. Now, what would it be? It would be an application process if they have a new instrument, a new model instrument. All right, so any significant changes to the physical instrument or to the software, they will have to submit an application to the state police to certify that instrument to use in the state of Louisiana. And that certification process will include the collection of all that stuff that they had collected before, the review by state police, and then they have to provide an actual test model. All of them have standalone test models. You don't have to put them in the car, or they will put one in the car if you ask them to. But most of them have a standalone. It's battery operated, and we would take those in. And that section that's going to regulate currently has, besides troopers, they currently have technicians that work on the evidentiary instruments, and so those technicians can put those instruments through their paces to make sure that they are good, that they can't be circumvented, that they don't read false readings, that they're good instruments.
And nobody does that now?
Nope, no ma'am.
Okay.
I started doing it last year. I started requesting those instruments from them, but they didn't have to give them to us. They did. They were nice, and we would use them in our other side of the house, which was training. We'd use them in drinking labs, and we'd try to beat them and try to circumvent them. But their technology is really good now.
Thank you very much. Thank you,
ma'am.
Mr. Chair.
I think she asked the question of who actually calibrates. So what you're telling me is that the state trooper approves the device, but any recalibration, in other words, if the device should break, something should transpire,
Yes, sir.
then you're telling me that the company will have to recalibrate that device?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes. At some of the companies, at the vendor sites, they do that. Right? They have the capabilities of doing that. Some of them will pull that device and send it back to their headquarters and just replace that device. Most of them now recently have just started replacing the device, even though they could fix one or recalibrate it in-house. They'll pull one to be known valid.
Okay. I guess my next question is, what's the actual, right now, a DWI fine can be between what, $300 to $1,000? Am I correct? About that much?
Okay.
And how much would the device cost the person if they were to get a DWI?
On a full price would be approximately $90 to install it, and approximately $75 per month. So about $250 a day.
$250 a day. Okay. So if an individual were to get a DWI, and that individual has hardship, can't afford the cost of the DWI, and that individual chooses not just take his license and I'm no longer going to drive because I can't afford it. Within a year, he's done well. He's tried to get himself right. When he does go to renew his license within a year, he still have to put that device in his car?
Yes, sir. Right now we have it's a dual program, right? So someone gets a DWI, right? And if let's just go with a first offense. It's a first offense. Someone gets a DWI and they get suspended. Right? They go through the whole process. Let's just say they don't even contest the suspension. So after 30 days after their arrest, they're suspended for 90 days. They provided a sample, and they're going to be suspended for 90 days. That's on the administrative side. They are suspended for those 90 days. Right now, their choices are they could be suspended for those 90 days. Right? They're not allowed to drive. The caveat to that is I can tell you I've probably written thousands of driving under suspension tickets. So they are driving. Or another choice that they have is they could immediately get an ignition interlock right now, and they can start driving. They could wait 30 days and do a hard suspension and just not do anything, right, for those 30 days, and then get a hardship without a ignition interlock for the last 60 days. Those are all options available to them now. What they usually choose to do is drive under suspension. That's the general choice on a first offense, is they just choose to drive under suspension. What this does is it reaches out to those people. First and foremost, we're going to get those. We're going to reach out to them, and we're going to say, hey, you have to have ignition interlock, and you have to have it for 6 months, because we have a responsibility to ensure that you don't do this again. You just simply don't do it. You know, that's what we want you to do. We want you to learn your lesson right now. Please don't do this. And you talked about affordability a minute ago. Right now, there's no affordability program in the state of Louisiana. They still have to have it because of our dual program. Remember that? Well, so far, all we've talked about is administrative. They haven't even gone to court yet. Because when they go to court on that first offense and they're found guilty, now they're suspended for an additional 12 months. And in order to get their driver's license back, they have to have an ignition interlock if they want it back immediately. It's already like that, right? What we're doing is we're identifying them up front, right? So their suspension is upheld. We want you to immediately get that thing so you could start your time right now, right? And we're going to identify every minute of it, and we're going to know whether or not you were successfully doing this. You're going to have people helping, right? And watching you do this. You talked about affordability. No program right now for affordability. This bill includes a industry program where they will, if they qualify, they will pay no more than 50% cost. So that installation cost goes down to $45, and it goes down to $1.25 a day.
Okay. The other thing I did see in the bill is about a camera. Now that Interlock will have a camera in your car, if I were to have an individual in my car that would not want to be seen while driving or riding with you, what kind of protection do you have for that individual? The privacy concerns are what I have.
Yes, sir. And I can see that. Most of them have the camera mounted on the instrument. So when they hold it up, it's basically going to get your face. And so unless that person's looking over their shoulder or it catches a part of them, it may. I think that would be kind of incumbent upon the client to tell them, hey, I have this device and it's going to take my picture when I have to blow in it. If you don't want your picture taken, get out of the camera. I think that would be kind of incumbent upon them. You know, we're talking about such a small fraction of the population as well, sir. I mean, if every last DWI arrest was convicted and had to have the ignition interlock, you're talking about 0.5% of the complete population of Louisiana. 0.5%. So literally 99.6% of the population choose not to drink and drive, or at least don't get caught. So, and that's the people that I'm really concerned about, is those saving lives.
Okay. All right, Representative Cormier.
Yeah, you had mentioned that funds are being withheld. The feds are withholding money right now from the state of Louisiana because we don't have. Can you say that?
There's a whole set of laws, but one of them is our ignition interlocks. They're not in compliance with federal guidelines. Like, so we have the major one is we allow a first offender not to have it.
But the feds are. You're saying the feds are withholding.
Correct.
Just like they did when they made us move to 0.08.
That's correct.
And I've pointed this out a few times. We're going to have to look into this because I don't like the feds stepping on us. But I think Oklahoma sued because the feds they were withholding money and it was road funds. And they sued and beat them in federal court. So I don't like that. Nothing to do with this, but when you brought that up, it made me think about it. So thank you for that. I am supporting this, but I just wanted to ask that question because.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rep. Cormier may have addressed part of what I was going to ask. We are going from 0.20 to 0.15 because why?
That's it. Okay, it's best practices across the United States. It's all of them are going down to. I think it's us and is it Missouri? Yeah, we in Missouri are the last vestiges of the 0.20 enhanced.
Oh,
penalties.
really?
Yeah.
And everyone else is at 0.15.
0.15. Yes, ma'am.
You may have mentioned this, but Where does one go to have one of these devices put in their vehicle?
Well, currently there's approximately 106 different locations across the state that could do it. The Office of Motor Vehicles maintains a web page that has all the manufacturers and all the vendors listed. And so someone is assigned to have one of these currently. They just go to that web page, they pick one close by to their house, and they go get it.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Selders.
You just mentioned that if you're assigned to have who assigns it now to go and a judge assigns it, or
It's like we have that dual program, right? We have a dual system. So on the administrative side and on the criminal side. So if you have that suspension upheld, then there are reinstatement requirements that you have it, and then on the other side of it, on the criminal side, you could be told to have it. And there's also another condition of bail. Any second offense or greater as a condition of bail is the judge is supposed to
the
assign
judge.
it. Yeah,
But with this, even with the first offense, we'll be taking the power away from the judge to assign if they wanted to. This will take that power away from them, correct?
It makes them on the reinstatement side. It's going to require it.
So it's taking the power away. So they have to.
It's absolutely.
Oh, can they not? So what happens if the judge say, I don't think you should have it? If we make the law that they should, then the judge can't override what
Not
we decide.
much different than what it is now. I mean, like I said, it's the same thing as the dual system. I mean, right now, I just told you in that first offense. Mm-hmm. All it would do is say you have to have it for those 180 days, right? If the judge wanted to come back right now in law, if they're convicted, they're supposed to be suspended for that additional year. And right now in law, if they choose to drive immediately, they have to have it. Ignition interlock upon showing to the department that they have one, they're immediately eligible for a restricted driver's license right now.
Okay.
So I don't think it changed that much.
Yeah, because I remember you said earlier something about you get credit going towards your time
Yes,
of having
sir.
it, and
Absolutely.
and what I'm asking, I guess, who regulates that credit for the time? Is that the judges or is that administration? Because I'm confused on the two because there's so many different systems, and I'm
Yes,
just
sir.
actually asking about clarity. So who decides? So the judge say, "No, I'm not giving you credit for time served that this interlocked in your vehicle. You need to start over." They could do that.
That's a very good point, because up until 2018, I think it was, and Mr. Quid's not in here anymore, but I think Mr. Quid wrote something for someone. It was changed up until that point, because that's one of the things that I highlighted in my research was up until that point, say a judge told someone to have it as a condition of bond, and they got it and they left it in their car, and then all of a sudden they go to try to get their driver, but they get it out after 6 months, and then they go to get their driver's license reinstated, and the Office of Motor Vehicles will say, well, you have to have the ignition interlock. Well, I just got it out. I had it for 6 months.
Right.
Well, you never told us that.
I got you.
Right. So now the law is actually written to where they are supposed to get credit for time. Right. What happens is, because we've all been to the Office of Motor Vehicles, right, and we know there's more than one of them. Right. There's a little disparity there, because what I'm being told is that's not quite the case. There's still people that fall through the loopholes, right? Because they are still required to share that with Office of Motor Vehicles. So if another entity other than Office of Motor Vehicles says, hey, you have to have one, Office of Motor Vehicles still has to be made aware. Mm-hmm. What they don't tell them is there are requirements. If that person fails to do, if he violates. So I don't know if the Office of Motor Vehicles at this time is saying, okay, let's say the person you talked about had it for a bail, had it for 6 months, that he wanted to get reinstated. He goes to the Office of Motor Vehicles and he says, oh, I just got rid of it because I had it for bail. Okay, well, can you get the records from Smart Start or for Drager? Can you get them for us? Yes, I can. Mm-hmm. So he brings over this printout, and it shows where he failed to start because his BAC on these instruments right now, it's currently a .03 on these instruments. This will change it to a .02 start rate. All right, so let's just say on his printout of his record, it says that he failed to start 5 times because he blew over a .02, and he was not able to get it started within 30 minutes. You know, so he had too much to drink the night before, and now he's trying to start his car. Or it's that night, because it's significantly higher. He failed to do this or failed to do that. He violated several times. Now, he didn't know that he couldn't violate. There's nobody watching him. What this does is fix it, because when those things start popping up like that, those failure to starts and those failure to roll and retest and all the things start popping up, they're going to get a call from one of the regulators, one of the troopers, saying, hey, you are failing miserably and you're not going to be able to get this thing off. As a matter of fact, this law will address failures of what we call a violation reset and then a violation lockout. A violation reset can happen because someone circumvents it, right? So all these things they could tell when you take a part off of them, right? It actually sends a message to the database saying, hey, someone just disconnected the head device. Right. Someone just disconnected from the battery. It tells them that. If they circumvent it, or if they fail to bring it into a vendor, because they have to do it within every 35 days. It's 30 days. We give them a 5-day grace period. So it's every 35 days. If they fail to bring it in for its recal check and download, well, it's gonna flag them. And it goes into what you call a violation reset. Now, in a violation reset, they have 5 days to bring it to a vendor, and they will bring it out of violation reset and download it and do whatever they need to do. If they don't bring it in those 5 days, it'll go into violation lockout, and they will not be able to start their vehicle. Gotcha. Now they have to call the vendor and say, they have to acknowledge, hey, I did this, what can I do? Which brings up another good point, because people think now they're stuck, someone's going to have to tow their vehicle. No. The vendor can then give them a one-time code. They plug in their code. They're able to start their car. They immediately have to bring it to that vendor.
Mm-hmm. So another question, I guess, when you say trooper, what if I was to get a DWI in East Baton Rouge Parish by a city police, or a sheriff? Who kind of monitors it then? Does the state troopers monitor that as well?
They're going to monitor the fact that person has to have the ignition interlock. So they'll monitor them on the ignition interlock side. And what I always envision, because these relationships don't exist right now, right? Because these troopers don't exist.
This is a program that you want to implement.
This is something that I envisioned, started, and now they're wanting to move.
I got you. So how does it like the sheriff association, the DA associations, these city police officers, I guess associations feel about, because it's like a new department that we're trying to correct, right?
It's just an addition to the current unit that deals with all things DWI.
Okay, but does it directly like work with these local municipalities? I guess that's the question.
I always envision them working with the actual courts, right? So it may be a city court's probationary office, or the city prosecutors themselves, because you're going to need to collect that data. There's going to have to be a relationship between them, so when they do have that conviction or that order to have that ignition interlock, that information gets over to the state police, and now they could just plug that name into their list of people now they have to track.
Okay.
Right.
And in your envision, do you envision working with the criminal justice as far as making the time, the sentencing, as far as how these places work together?
Absolutely. In a perfect world, that would all work together.
For sure.
Because these people would be demonstrating to the state of Louisiana, I'm responsible. I should have my driver's license. I'm not drinking and driving anymore. I've heard a lot of talk about insurance. In a perfect world, as soon as you get that thing in your vehicle, insurance companies, they're quick to notify or to get on to you when you get the DWI, right? Because you have to have the insurance, the extra insurance. But if you get this device in your car and now somebody's watching you, do you get a discount on the SR22? Probably not.
All right.
So in a perfect world, absolutely.
So another question I had with, I know you mentioned something about every 10 to 15 minutes when you're in the car, it'll randomly ask you to take a test.
It's every 10 to 45 minutes.
10 to 45 minutes. So if I'm in East Baton Rouge Parish and I'm driving to Shreveport, I may have to just pull over and take this test, or is it something I can do while I'm driving?
Either or. It gives you 7 minutes. Once it notifies you, it gives you 7 minutes. So there's plenty. Usually that's plenty of time to either find a safe place to pull over, or you could do it. You are able to do it while you're driving.
Because if I'm on the Pontchartrain, that's one of the longest bridges in the world.
Right.
I may not make it to the other side.
Right.
So what's the consequences, or how do I deal with that? And I think we just passed something yesterday that if you had a phone in your hand, you get ticketed or pulled over. So just little loopholes that we may have to deal with. And another star I put on my little pad was students, first offense. And I know you said, hey, why aren't you driving this car? This is a red flag. I know you got to go to work. I know you got to go to school. It's an issue. But if I got a DWI as a student, I may not be driving my car. So how does that work with the interlock system to justify me having it if I don't drive or if I don't commute? And I did that one time.
And again, excellent question. And again, it's going to be a case-by-case basis, and that's why those troopers are going to exist.
Who's going to determine that case-by-case basis of taking it from the judge?
Well, the judge is generally, right now, they're not doing anything. Like I said, they're not even looking at the data. There's nothing. There's no one looking at the data right now at all.
So who's going to judge the case-by-case?
So when that trooper sees that anomaly,
Okay.
right, they're going to reach out to him, say, hey, what's going on?
But what if a city police officer gave me that ticket, or a sheriff gave me that ticket? Why would I have to go see the state trooper?
Are you talking about for the DWI or for the?
The DWI.
Well, because that's who's going to regulate the industry.
Okay,
right?
I got
That's
you.
who's
I see
gonna
what you're
have-
saying.
That's who the troopers are going to have the access to all
I got
those
you.
records.
Everybody.
Everybody
in the
has to
state.
be ignition law. That's how.
How many troopers you think we're going to, curiously, throughout the state to regulate this DWI process with 64 pairs? I'm not, and we already short on troopers.
Yeah, I'm saying right now they're asking for, I think, 5.
Yeah, that's a lot. 5, not enough
No,
throughout the state.
oh no,
5.
yeah, because most of it could be done in an office. I mean, you're talking,
okay.
you're talking about. I mean, there's states like Washington, who has one of the model programs, and they have 3 people in the state of Washington. It's a huge state,
Gotcha.
and they do this unfaltering. They reach out to these people. They do details. Someone's supposed to have a car, the one I talked about a minute ago,
All right.
who puts it in a car and doesn't drive that
So
car.
those three troopers, they decide who's gonna get the interlock case by case.
No, they
who's
don't decide. The law decides who's going to have the ignition interlock. They
Okay.
simply monitor them. And so when you have a case like that, when someone has on their that anomaly where they're not driving in your scenario,
Right.
well, if they called them up and said, "Hey, look, I see you haven't started this car. You haven't," and if they say, "Look, I'm a student at Louisiana Tech. The car is here. You're more than welcome to come by and see it. It's parked here. I'll walk all over campus. Very rarely do I need to go anywhere, and I've just been catching rides, so I don't have to even mess with it."
Even
Right.
if I'm asking, 'cause like I say, case by case. I went home for the weekend, drove my parents' car. I really don't own a car. What's the next step?
Well, and the problem with that is, if you have to have it, it's got to be in any car that you drive.
All right. So my
That's
dad's
present
car.
law. That's
Yeah.
that's current law.
Yeah, but I'm the first offense. So my dad's car, and I drove it. It'll have to be in his car, even though I'm back at school. I'm at LSU if I'm from Monroe. So that have to be in my dad's car while I'm at school, catching a bus, Ubering, and my dad, now does he have to blow for me? I don't know.
Yeah,
And what are
like,
these
you
problems that we're
yeah,
creating with these,
when driving
with
a car.
with this situation? Is like, did we iron out these wrinkles before we even got here? In the scenarios, and that's because in my head, that's what I think about. I think about those students. I think about, like I said, if I'm going to LSU, I'm from Monroe, I get a DWI, first offense. Now, whose car is on lock? And I don't even own a car, so I'm putting my parents in a bad situation. And I don't know. I'm just there's all
Representative
scenarios.
Sellers,
I don't know.
I would
don't
be
know.
happy to work with you on details like this. I would argue that dealing with those details is much easier than talking to families who lose people because of somebody driving a
absolutely.
second time. So I'm happy to work with you on this kind of stuff. I get what you're going on it. I'm just saying, like, I think we got to put it in big perspective here on the inconveniences versus the big time problems. Thank you.
Okay, Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like someone from the state police to answer a few questions about the fiscal note. Is money going to be collected from these fines to help pay for what I see that there are going to be some initial costs to put this system in place and so forth?
Yes, ma'am. Lieutenant Robert Burns, Louisiana State Police. So when we looked at, all of the things that the bill is going to require state police to do, you can go to page 11, line 15, and start working your way down. It's a very heavy lift for state police. We currently do not have the manpower to do what this bill is requesting for us to do. So in the fiscal note, that's where we listed the 5 troopers. It would be 1 supervisor, 3 troopers, 1 per region of the state, and then an administrative trooper. Those individuals would be tasked with carrying out all of the requirements of this bill. One thing that we spoke about when we were constructing the fiscal note is, this is not a program that's currently in place for us, and we may have to, down the road, revisit this and possibly ask for additional positions. But as of right now, the 5 positions, that's our best guess. We have been, assured that through I forgot what the exact term for the fund is, but the fees collected as part of the bill would address our fiscal costs associated with those 5 positions. And obviously we're still going to have to go and ask for those, for our TO to be increased by that amount.
Is there someone who can explain the fees a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Sure, we can talk through. I'm going to give you what I got from the fiscal
Okay.
note, but just go ahead.
I'm looking at that right now.
Yeah, sure.
I'm trying to.
So you get the 1,000 for device certification, 500 for annual recertification, 125 to 250 for initial service, 75 for the annual renewal, 50 for the initial ignition tech certification, then 25 for the annual renewal of the ignition tech certification.
But that goes to the provider of the interlock device, or how much of it would go to the fund to provide?
Yeah, those are the fees paid by the manufacturers to the state police to go into the ignition interlock regulation fund. So so we're clear on that. Remember the new model I talked about earlier? Okay, so if they come in with a new model, it's Draeger, and they want to use the new D1000, they want to bring it to the state, and they make application, they're going to pay $1,000 for that application, that one time, right? If they use it for the next 10 years, it's a $500 renewal each year.
What about for the individual who has to have it put in the car?
They pay their cost. They pay if it's normal, if it's full price and they don't have industry, it's $90 for installation. It's $75 a month.
$75 a month.
$250 a day.
I got you. Yep, that answers.
I think we have the fiscal analyst. She's in the room. Can you come and explain exactly how this is going to work?
Good afternoon. I'm Patrice Thomas with the Legislative Fiscal Office. When the bill is basically a fee bill, and it will authorize the state police to collect fees on manufacturers as well as individuals who operate service centers for interlock devices. I think Representative Wright went over the fees. The fees will be paid annually to the Office of State Police, and they will be used by the Applied Technology Unit within State Police to pay for overseeing and regulating the program. In addition, there are certain fees that will be paid by the violator or the person who does have to have the interlock device, and it'll be a $10 installation verification form that they have to pay one time, and then they'll have to pay a $5 fee every 30 days for the calibration assessment So those are the fees paid.
My light is still on, so I'm going to ask a question. Will the amount of money, $1,000, then the 500 annual, that doesn't seem like that's going to be enough money for the applied technology unit within the state police.
Well, the $1,000, those are for the manufacturers. So
Correct.
there's roughly, I think, 7 in the state. So they'll pay an initial $1,000 to the Office of
That's
State Police.
$7,000.
And then annually they'll pay $500 for renewal. In addition, most of the money, then you have the service centers who are also going to pay an initial fee, then an annual fee. But most of the money that I could not really quantify will be coming from the offenders and how much they'll have to pay for the $5 a month for the 30-day calibration. And that's how I interpret the bill. So if anybody has anything else, we can discuss it, but that's my interpretation of how it's written.
But the monthly fee goes to
Office of
the
State
provider
No, to my knowledge, it would go to Office of State
from the
Police.
offender?
From the offender.
Negative. No.
Well, we can discuss how it was
The
written in the
offender's
language.
money goes to the provider of the interlock, correct?
Right. They will pay $90 to install, $75 a month, full price. They are not assessed a $5 fee per month. They are not assessed at the $10 installation. Right. The manufacturers are paying out of the $90, right, for the installation. They will make $80. They will give the state police $10. These vendors are contracted by the manufacturers. So all these vendor fees, so the vendor certifications and recertifications are actually paid by their manufacturer, right? So each vendor has a specific manufacturer that they are contracted with, right? So we got a group of them that were with Draeger, a group of them with Interlock, a group of them with Guardian. So if you're with Guardian, you're a vendor for Guardian. Guardian will pay for each one of its vendors' sites, certification and recertification. And each time they have a technician or a certifier, because there's 2 different levels of technician, each time they will certify them, pay for them to be certified, and they will also actually pay for recertification every year. So the vendors themselves are not paying anything. That is actually the manufacturers. All these fees are being paid by each one of the 7 manufacturers.
I think I understand that. And look, I'm all for this. I just wonder what it does to the state police budget. Is this going to be enough money, or are y'all going to be in the hole a considerable amount of money because of it just doesn't seem like the state police are getting very much from this. Enough to do their regulating.
Okay, so if you look at the numbers historically, what you're going to find, and they're pretty consistent. On a non-COVID year, we as a state arrest approximately 20,000 people, approximately arrested. That doesn't necessarily mean convicted, right? Because if you look at the data, also what the Applied Technology Unit does is also the evidentiary side of the house. So they do the evidentiary instruments, and there's a fund associated with that for when a convicted person actually provides a breath sample or a blood sample. Either one, they have to pay into the DWI testing and maintenance fund. And so part of my job previously was to keep track of that fund and the money's going in. And consistently, although we never can get our hands on actual conviction data, it's almost impossible. But we had the data of who was being arrested in what year, in what month, and how much money was being submitted by each jurisdiction by month. And now we didn't necessarily know when these arrests occurred, that the money was coming from, tracking. So each year, which we're going to kind of balance the budget, right? We're going to look at it and say how much money did we make based on the number of arrests. every year it is consistently somewhere between 30 and 40%, which would tell you that we truly have probably about a 36-37% conviction rate in the state of Louisiana. So you take that same number and you figure, and then you're going to estimate the 20,000 per year, and then do 36-37% of that. You're going to end up with about 7,700, 8,000 people that are going to have the ignition interlock, and then you figure up for that there's a $10 for the installation for each one. So 10 times 8,000, right? 80,000. Is that what you got? Right, and then $5 a month per recal for each one of the instruments throughout the year. So it comes out to a pretty substantial amount of money when you're talking about paying 5 troopers.
Representative Freiberg, do you see the model that's on page 2 of the fiscal note under revenue explanation continue
Yeah,
from page
that's
1?
what I was looking at. And
So,
it
I mean-
seems like the state's going to have to come up with money.
No,
No?
the minimum that I was able to calculate was approximately around 774,000, just in fees from manufacturers and the service centers. What I was not able to quantify was how many offenders who have to have interlock devices will be paying the $10 for the installation and the $5 a month for the calibration.
So what you're
That
saying
not
is you think
calculated.
the money's going to balance out?
At the minimum for the first year of implementation, I think the state police reported $1 million. Yes, it was $1,547,147. Then I estimated around $774,000 for fees. So that first year, they may not have enough money to implement the program fully if we're talking about 12 months of implementation. But then the following years, their after one-time expenses, their initial cost goes down to $688,000.
And then even at year 25, 26, it's still $723,000.
Yes, but then I'm estimating probably at least I know it's going to be over $774,000 from this revenue, but I was not able to quantify the cost for the violators, what they're going to pay.
Thank you.
Lieutenant Burns, can you come back to the table? You mentioned you guys are short-handed. Approximately how many troopers you guys are short? And you did mention that it would be a challenge for you as it relates to your budget on trying to hire new officers along with trying to place these officers in these various positions. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. We currently have, now this is a rough number and it changes daily. We have retirements coming in literally daily. But based upon our TO and what we currently have, we have somewhere around 170 vacancies. We haven't had an academy class since the beginning of 2019. We have been working very diligently this legislative session to try to secure funding for academy classes. But as I stated, the requirements of this bill are a heavy lift for our applied technology section. We do not have the manpower to do what this bill requires unless what we have requested in the fiscal note comes to fruition.
Okay. Representative Shamahorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Burns. I am so glad you made it back to the table. I, like my fellow member, is concerned about the fiscal note. I don't want to implement anything that is going to jeopardize us losing, because nobody's going to be required to put this stuff in their vehicles. I mean, they still have the option of not doing it if this goes through, from the way I understand. So I would rather have the fee up front instead of us falling short on the very first year. I think I see on here where it's possibly $300,000 shy on the first year of implementation. That's a risk you take in business. I don't think it's a risk we want to take with a department that's already undermanned and strapped, for income. I am for this bill, but my only concerns is what's coming back to be for the administration part of it. How do you feel about that? I mean, do you feel like it's enough funding to feel safe to go ahead and do the 5 if we can find 5 employees to take care of it?
Do I feel it's enough funding or enough manpower for the
Enough funding for the additional manpower that you're going to have to find.
Yes, sir. So, as we move through the process, and I'm assuming this bill is going to go through a dual referment based upon the fiscal note, I would hope that as we come to the table and discuss the fiscal note, that the bill author and his staff that he's working with are able to prove their case that the funding is sufficient to cover our requests. The best I can tell you is, as a department, we've offered up what we need. We've attached a price tag to that, and I trust in the legislature to evaluate everything and then make an informed decision that this will not be an unfunded mandate upon state police applied technology.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr.
Representative Brass.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One quick question. Throughout the conversation we've had, I've heard you mention 7 manufacturers, a number of vendors, a number of service centers. How do we come to those numbers as far as the selection or the approval process? Because ultimately, I'm assuming that they all don't use the same software, the same infrastructure. So my concern is with using those amount or those different number of manufacturers, vendors, and service centers, how can we make those compatible to whatever system or technology that our state police is utilizing?
Each one of them have their own standalone website, right? So they have their own web portals, and several of our manufacturers are run by the same conglomerate.
When we say several of our, who's our?
Louisiana's, the ones that are operating in Louisiana currently.
With the state police?
Yeah,
Okay.
They are on the same backbone because they're essentially the same company running under a couple of different names, like Interlock and Guardian are run by the same parent corporation. So they have their web portals, and those troopers will have an access to those web portals to see all those clients in their regions.
Are all of their the manufacturers, are all of their prices the same as far as the devices that's placed in the and does the person that's charged with the DWI, do they have the opportunity to choose the lower company providing those services at a lower cost?
Yeah, so they all average that $90 a month and then the $75 a month. It averages out to that. What's happening now with those 7 companies, because the average across the United States, there's some that have more than 7, some that have less, but the average is 6. So we have one more than the average here in the state, operate here in the state of Louisiana. And what happens now is they'll call one that's nearby their house, and they'll find out, how much is it to do this or this, and then they'll call the next one. It's not unheard of for them to call 2 or 3 of them. And as soon as they mention they've called this one or that one, they'll ask, that third one will ask, or the second will ask, what did they say they would do it for? And then they'll undercut them by $5. So it's capitalism at its best. Right now, they'll undercut each other.
So there's no set pricing schedule?
And I would be real wary of doing that, because I could tell you, being a trooper, when the Public Service Commission, I believe it is, regulated wreckers and said, hey, you could charge $185 to go get a car, and they did exactly what I think you're suggesting to do, which regulate the amount. Some of them were charging $50 to go get a car. All of them started charging $185 to go get a car. Every last one of them. And that's what happens when you put that fee, when you say, well, you could charge between this and this, they're going to the top.
And the flip side, if you don't put it, then if they all agree to go to the higher level, then ultimately you're impacting going to be the person who has to charge going to be required to pay more if everybody's standard is above what the norm or the average should be, I would think.
I would say talking to the manufacturers, we're lower priced than most of the other states. It's kind of a southern average. And with those 7 manufacturers, and I know of at least 2 more manufacturers that want to come into the state, with that competition, it keeps our prices low.
So, Representative Byrne, are you guys currently using these 7 manufacturers that we're saying that's already integrated within you guys' technology system? And do you feel confident? Okay.
Yeah, I actually have a representative from Applied Technology here if you have some specific questions for the unit. Would you like to?
Okay,
ask
no, I
him
just
some
want to
questions?
make sure we didn't put any extra burden on
Okay,
you
sure.
guys in addition to the fiscal note.
Sure.
That will require you guys to make some technology upgrades just to make sure that you could be compatible with the multiple systems.
Right.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we have several other individuals that wish to speak, but I have a question before you leave. I'm a little confused. I'm looking at the bill. I'm trying to see where in this bill does the state where the offender will pay the fees directly to the manufacturer. It's not clear. I don't see that.
No, they're just going to pay just like they do now. They're going to pay the whatever vendor they choose. If they choose Bob's Radio Shop, and Bob's Radio Shop is contracted with Draeger, right? So Draeger is their manufacturer. Then they're going to pay the same $90 to install and $75 a month to Bob's shop.
But I think you did say it was going directly to the manufacturer. I thought that's what you
Mr. Chair, it's we're not changing it in the bill because it's already in the law, and we're not going to change it. That's why it's not stated in there in the bill.
All right. Let me have to. Can you explain exactly?
I guess there's some confusion about the fields. This bill authorizes the state police to collect fees on manufacturers, service centers, technicians, as well as an installation form from each of the violators, as well as a 30-day calibration fee. What the gentleman is talking about is what the offender would pay just in the private market to the company to have the interlock device. Those are separate costs. So you understand. So right now, the manufacturers will have to pay more to the Office of State Police. Service centers will have to pay a fee to state police, and technicians will have to be certified. So state police will be getting money from those authorized fees under this measure. That's separate from when the offender with the interlock device will have to call up a company and actually get the device installed in their car, and they're already paying that. You see it?
Yeah, these fees came directly from working with all the manufacturers. They've actually been here in Louisiana several times, sitting in a conference room over at the State Police Academy. Each one of these, they are going to pay the manufacturer. So state police is going to, for each installation that Draeger makes, they are going to pay $10 to the state police, right? For each recertification or recal check they do for the month of March 2022, they will cut a check to the state police. That will not come from a violator.
The physical note presumes that those costs will be passed on to the person who's getting the interlock device. And if there's something different, I'll be more than happy to alter my note. But right now, I'm presuming that the $10 and the $5 will be passed on to the violator.
Okay, we'll have the witnesses that sent a card in support. Our first one is Stacy Duyon, and she's with MAD. Gary Prince with MAD. Julie Yasanat with MAD, and Dayla Brady. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I get that often. Good morning. First, I want to say thank you guys for offering us our opportunity to speak. My name is Delia Brady, and I'm representing MAD along with my family. My family was the Gaines family. They were killed. There was 7 people killed on May 30th, 2012. My mom, my sister, and all 4 of my sister kids. They were coming home from Bible study when a drunk driver hit them head on. I hear a lot of discussion about the cost and who's responsible. But this bill, I think this bill is imperative to be passed because This offender had 4 multiple DWI offenses that he was charged with. If he would have been caught that first time, my family would still be here. So I understand that it's a lot of legalities that you have to try to figure out what should be done, but we're sitting here as victims. We have to live after situations take place. This bill is it's not to punish the person, it's to prevent this from happening, not to us, but also to you guys. Your family could be on the highway and someone can hit them. And we're not trying to punish the drunk driver. We're trying to prevent them from causing us to go through this. I have 4 children. They suffer from anxiety and depression. I have to take anxiety medicine. Not only that, 2 years after my mom's death, May 30th, 2012, May 30th, 2014, my brother's 14-year-old son shot and killed himself on the anniversary of their deaths. So this is not to hurt people that have this. This is an addiction, most of them. But if you have a person that makes a mistake on their first time, you have to, I don't care what you do in life, you have to suffer your consequences. If they make a mistake, this for a year, you're just getting the device, our family cannot come back. So I don't think this bill, I think this bill is imperative, not just for us, but for you guys as well. This could be your child, your grandchild, your mom, your dad. I lost 3 generations at one time, 3. So I think it is very important that this bill is passed. I don't think this is something that's gonna hurt someone. I understand we're talking about money, but at the end of life, how much would you pay for your family to be back here? How much would you give? I would pay if I had a sibling or a child that had a drug or alcohol problem. I would pay anything a month to prevent him from killing one of your family members, prevent him from killing anyone else. So I think that, I know this is a very sensitive subject for us, but I know we're looking at the cost and we're looking at the manpower. It's nothing when you're saving one person's life. If someone has to pay $75 a month, if they had to pay $200 a month, they have to pay rent, they have to pay for food, they make it happen. If you have this problem and you can save someone's life for paying $100 a month, and it's only for a year, we can't get our family back. In 19 days, I'm going to be celebrating 9 years of my family being gone. 9 years. 3 generations, a 6-year-old, 11-year-old girl, a 15 and a 13-year-old boy. My nephew, my sister was 33, my mom was 63. Good health, an evangelist in the church, leaving Bible study. They were killed. This offender had 4 prior DWI arrests. So if he had a device in his car that could have prevented him from killing my family this wouldn't have happened, that first offense. He had 4 prior that he was arrested for. 30 years old, celebrating his 30th birthday. He didn't learn from his lesson the first time. And just like the Representative Wright said, this is something now with a camera that's involved when you can prevent, because there's ways to get around things. If I can let anyone, he could let anyone blow for him just to start the vehicle. A camera showing you that it's actually him, just the manpower for someone to monitor this. I don't think we're asking too much, because at the end of the day, my family's gone. I'm trying to save your family. So I thank you guys for the time to speak.
Thank you.
How you doing? My name is Joan Robinson. Originally, I said I wasn't going to speak. The day after Good Friday this year, my daughter was coming from work at the Dairy Queen on Sherwood. A drunk driver hit her and killed her we took her off life support on the 6th of April. She was 17. His alcohol level was 0.21. At this point, he hasn't been arrested, but I think if this is his first offense, I think this should be in his car, and that would save somebody else's life. My daughter is supposed to graduate on the 19th. I'm having to go and accept her diploma. This hurts. So if this could help the next person not go through what I'm going through at this moment, I think this bill should be passed.
Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to be here today to share my daughter's story. My name is Stacy DWI, and on February 4th of 2018, Super Bowl Sunday, my life and the life of thousands around me changed forever. At approximately 7:45 p.m., I was waiting on the side of the road to find out if my daughter and her friends survived or died in a crash. Unfortunately, at the end of waiting, my 16-year-old daughter, along with her 15-year-old best friend, were killed by a drunk driver. 2 other kids were injured as well. I say crash because it wasn't an accident. It was someone's conscious decision to get behind the wheel and drive intoxicated. He was only driving 30 miles per hour on Highway 167 in Vermilion Parish, which the speed limit is 65. My daughter was driving 60 miles an hour on that same road, so according to the law, they were both within the speed limit. The problem, this young man, who was 20 years old at the time of the crash, was so intoxicated he didn't realize he was driving on the wrong side of the road. He hit my daughter and her friends head on. Immediately, the drunk driver gets out of the car and asks what happened. Once reality set in, he fled on foot. You see, this wasn't his first offense. It was actually his 4th time. He received 2 DUIs before he was 17, and 18 months before he killed my daughter and her friend, he had received another one. Of course, juvenile records are closed, so we didn't have the access to see what had happened. Yet we live in a small community, and we knew that he had never been prosecuted for the first 2. The judge handling the DUI for the 18 months prior to this one chose to continue the case 5 times, stating that he would wait till our case was tried and then convict him on that one. He was driving around and living the life without restrictions before he killed my daughter. Unfortunately, our judge forced him to plea on the case before we went to court. At his sentencing, he had 2 character witnesses. Both witnesses had had 4 DUIs, and it wasn't until they were in jail that their lives had changed. I strongly support this bill because I want to prevent any mom or father from living the hell I go through every day without my daughter. Some of you will say that this is a huge financial burden for the first-time offenders, which will affect them for years afterwards. Think about this. What do you think the financial burden would be to you if you had to bury your child? Or what do you think the emotional state would be for the lifetime of losing a child? Some of you will say that it's God's plan that my daughter was taken, but I will never agree with this. I think 3 DUIs and still drinking and driving and taking chances behind the wheel was God trying to give this young man a chance to wake up. Yet my daughter and her friend were at the wrong place at the wrong time. If this bill would have been in place, maybe it would have taught him the lesson he needed prior to killing my daughter. I thank you for listening to us, and I hope that each one of you agree with this bill.
Okay, we have. Please state your name for the record, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gary Prince. After hearing this stuff, it brings up a lot of emotions. I'm gonna try not to cry. I want to introduce all of you to my son, Jordan Michael Prince. He was a good kid. He loved to hunt and fish, hence the camouflage that his dad is wearing. 2015, May 24th, he was returning home from a party with a bunch of his friends. He had just graduated high school on the 12th of May. He wasn't doing anything wrong. He went to eat breakfast with a bunch of his friends late night. On the way back home, he was traveling on Highway 90 in Iberia Parish. If y'all are familiar with Highway 90 in Iberia Parish, there's 2 overpasses. One at the intersection of Jefferson Island Road and the other one about 1.5 miles away, Highway 14. He and his friends, they go over the Jefferson Island overpass. When they approach the Highway 14 overpass, there's someone driving the wrong way. My son happened to be in the inside lane, and his friends, they had friends on the side of him, some in the back of him. He didn't have anywhere to go. He crashed head on into this individual. The state troopers said the guy traveled about 9 miles going the wrong direction. He wasn't tested for his alcohol level until he got to the hospital in Lafayette, and it registered at 0.16, double the legal limit. The trooper told us that it would have been well over 0.2 if he would have gotten tested earlier. And I miss him every day. He was my hunting and fishing buddy. You know, I know the discussion about money, the state's strapped for money. I know with the downturn in all business, I work in all business. I've been working in all business all my adult life. And I know how bad it is. And I know that the funds aren't coming in. But this young man, he would have never left the state. He'd have stayed here. He loved Louisiana. We have property right down the road from our house, 4 miles, that we go hunt deer. He loved going there. Loved to fish. We live right near Lake Dotrieve. He wouldn't have left that. He wouldn't have left his fishing holes. He'd have stayed. How much tax money would the state have generated for this young man? He wanted to follow in my footsteps. He wanted to be a machinist. He already had his plans in line. He was working right down the road. If any of you hunt and fish, you may have heard of ProDrive surface outboard motors. Just right down the road from my house. He was working over there. He was doing mechanic work before he was out of school. Very mechanically inclined, a fine young man. You know, yeah, I'm partial to my child. But this tragedy affected us. I would not want anybody in here to walk in my shoes. This lady that talked about her 3 generations of a family that was gone in an instant. Yeah, my family's on anti-anxiety medications. My son, my oldest son, struggled with drug problems, all because of losing his brother. I'm in favor for this because, not because it's gonna do anything for Jordan. Jordan's gone. The only time I'll get to see Jordan and when it's my time to go. That's the only time I'll get to see him again. But this bill is going to help everyone in here, everyone in the state, to try to make... I don't understand Louisiana. I understand it's a party state and everything, but what makes it right to drink and get on the road? Stay at your house. Don't get on the highway. I don't care if people get drunk till they can't. They get drunk like Cooter Brown till you can't walk no more. Stay at your house. Have a plan. But a lot of people can't do that. That's where these devices need to be in these people's cars. Thank y'all for listening. And my prayer to every one of you guys, for all of us, is that we can drive on safer highways. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Julie Bizano, and I'm here in full support of HB 633, and I'm also here as a mother of a son whose life was taken by a drunk driver. Statistics show that within the next 24 hours, 300,000 adults will drink and drive. within the next 24 hours, and that one person will die at the hand of a drunk driver every 50 minutes, which means that 3 people would have died in the time we've been sitting in this committee meeting. This is my son, Ryan. In the case of Ryan, his life essentially did end when he was hit by a drunk driver, but he did not die immediately. He was walking from an LSU game on October 20th, 2007, here in Baton Rouge. He was walking across Nicholson Drive following 2 of his friends who crossed successfully. The driver who had hit Ryan had been tailgating all day and was well over the legal limit. Doctors later told me that they think in reflex to protect himself, Ryan crouched down. In the split second, he saw the SUV because the blows from the bumper were so severely hit his head and body. I'm sorry. This is the photo of day 2 from the ICU. The bumper tore the flesh from his skull on the left side and also crushing his arm, pelvis, and leg. The traumatic brain swelling had to be reduced by a drain that you can see in the photo. Every day of the next few weeks was not knowing if he would survive. Then the worry went to, will he wake up? And if he does, how badly will the brain be damaged? He remained in a coma for 8.5 months. During those months, he endured surgeries to repair the broken bones, kidney failure, countless staph infections, and respiratory failure, all while in a coma and vegetative state. He never woke up. He never recognized us. He never responded. You can never understand the anguish I went through as a single mother watching her only child helpless until you do as I did every day, praying to God that he could take me and let Ryan wake up. Ryan succumbed to his injuries, July 2nd, 2008, 2 months shy of his 25th birthday. Ryan's incident, which I cannot call an accident either, had far-reaching effects, still some unknown. He was my mother's first grandchild, her only grandson, beloved nephew, cousin, friend, and human to his pets. As Ryan suffered, we suffered, and we continue to suffer. We as family and friends and his community are forever changed for having known him, loved him, and forever changed by the reason he was taken from us. This is just one story of one person among those 300,000 incidents that will happen in the next day. I implore you to move this bill forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sorry.
Do we have any more? Anyone else? I think that's it for the cards in support. We have several cards in opposition. Those individuals that are wishing to speak in opposition is Haley Braid of Louisiana Association of Criminal Justice. We have Will Harrell with vote. Chico Yancey with vote. Sarah Whittington, Justice and Accountability Center for Louisiana, and Haley Braid of Louisiana Association of Criminal Justice.
Good afternoon. It's Hallie Bro.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Hallie Bro.
With Louisiana Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, and also as a constituent of Representative Freiberg. I'm here to share with the committee my position on the bill. Since I've been out of law school, I've only done criminal defense, first in Texas and now here. And primarily my defense has been of DWI offenders. And I believe that there's some confusion about this bill. There's a lot of talk from the gentleman about cases just going through the mill, running through the mill. That mill I think he's referencing is the criminal justice system. So we have a system that offenders go through in order to determine if they are convicted, as this committee knows. And at that time, judges determine whether a defendant should have an ignition interlock device as a condition of their punishment. That's one opportunity a driver has to be ordered to an ignition interlock. This bill would increase the amount of people that are forced to have the interlock device as an administrative punishment, as a violation of the implied consent statute. Currently, a first offense, or I guess we shouldn't call it an offense, a first incident of someone either failing a breath test, 0.08 or higher, or refusing to provide a sample when asked for one by a law enforcement officer, presently, that person may not be ordered to an ignition interlock device by the OMV. The bill would require that every driver who submits a sample of 0.15 or higher or refuses to provide a sample, they would be required to install and maintain that ignition interlock device. What I don't believe is the intention is that House Bill 633 actually seems to send the wrong message to Louisiana drivers. In the past, the legislature has incentivized people to provide breath samples because the breath sample, the penalty for a license suspension for a breath test failure is currently 90 days, but for a refusal, it's longer. But what this bill does is if you provide a sample of 0.15 or higher, you have a 2-year suspension. And if you refuse to provide a sample, the proposed bill would make that suspension 1 year. And I don't believe that should be the position of the Louisiana legislature, to make the suspension longer if you submit to a sample when asked for one by law enforcement. Also, currently, if the court orders a defendant to install and maintain the interlock device, that is monitored. That's monitored either by the court for unsupervised probation or by the Office of Probation and Parole when that person is put on probation. So there was a gentleman who said, no one's monitoring these drivers. Well, when it's ordered by the court, it absolutely is being monitored. And that's done by the role of a probation officer, which I believe is the appropriate person to do so. Because if that driver provides samples into that device that are concerning to the probation officer or to the court, that defendant is then allowed a hearing to determine if his probation should be revoked or that he's violated his probation in some way. House Bill 633 puts a lot of the monitoring for the administrative ignition interlock device to the troopers. I thought it was the Office of Motor Vehicles, but there's a lot of testimony about a trooper monitoring your device. So now we're talking about Louisiana drivers who are solely restricted to an interlock because of an administrative suspension, being monitored by troopers. This is someone who wouldn't be on probation, maybe not even convicted of a DWI, but being monitored by law enforcement for this device that's in their vehicle. And I think that that could have some unintended consequences. Also, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the CDC statistics show that DWI arrests and alcohol-related fatalities are down in Louisiana and across the country. So it seems like this drastic change to the number of drivers who would be required to install interlock devices is unwarranted. Additionally, most district attorneys' offices have an opportunity to require the interlock device as a condition of their pretrial intervention or pretrial diversion programs. Some have chosen to do so and some do not. But again, the number of DWI arrests in our state has continued to go down. I anticipate that the bill would completely overwhelm. I have the OMV. It sounds like troopers who would be supervising and monitoring such a large number of drivers. And ultimately, judges can continue to order defendants to install and maintain interlock devices as a condition of probation on cases that they see fit, which seems more suitable because those are Louisiana drivers who have been convicted of a crime. Representative Selders, I think he stepped out. He had an example where, maybe his son or a college student gets a DWI and either fails his breath test at the time of his arrest or refuses to provide a sample, the proposed bill will require that student to have an ignition interlock device and not allow him the choice to just sit out his suspension. His parents wouldn't be able to say, Johnny, we're going to not allow you to drive, over the next year. You're going to sit out your suspension. When he goes to get his license a year later, the OMB will then require that he provide proof that he's had the ignition interlock device. So the proposed bill does not afford a first-time offender to simply sit out their suspension, face that penalty. It would still require that driver to have the ignition interlock device. And I believe that's all I have. I do a lot of this work, so if there are any questions from the committee members that you believe I can answer, I'm open to your questions. I've been practicing since 2013, and I've handled hundreds and hundreds of DWI offenses, both in Texas and here, so I've seen how ignition interlock devices and convictions affect Louisiana drivers specifically. I had an old boss who made me get this device as an experiment so we could advise our clients on how they work. So I had the handheld device, and then my coworker had the device installed in her vehicle. So we were able to see how they work and be able to better explain to our clients what they needed to do to comply. But in Texas DPS monitors the ignition interlock device as the administrative punishment, but they don't monitor the reports. They simply have found that forcing the driver to install it and maintain it for X amount of months is effective, because that person cannot start their vehicle if they've provided a sample of 0.03 or greater. So Texas DPS has found that is working, that they're not going to monitor the specific reports. It's just a penalty. You installed the device, you prove to DPS that you've maintained that device for X amount of months. And so I don't believe that House Bill 633 is necessary, and I would urge the committee to oppose it.
Good afternoon. Sarah Whittington with the Justice and Accountability Center, also here in opposition to 633. Our office does civil legal services for people who are returning from periods of incarceration, and oftentimes the biggest barrier that they will face is access to a driver's license. We know that driver's licenses are very foundational in our state for employment and family stability and income purposes, and we would see that unfortunately this bill would be detrimental. And while I appreciate that maybe they want to regulate manufacturers, clearly the downstream effects of this are going to be borne solely by the individuals that have DWI charges, convictions, and be trying to reinstate their licenses and move past these incidences. Again, to echo what Hallie said, it's going to double the suspension for the first offense and make it mandatory. So therefore, that's going to delay for many people by 2 years or more their successful reentry. Additionally, this would disproportionately affect rural people. The idea of being able to sit out a suspension period may be a reality in urban areas where there is access to public transportation, but in many rural areas, that person's only access would potentially be family members or their own vehicle. We would see too, my concern is that this idea of a 30-day calibration test suddenly becoming a technical violation on a person's probationary record is problematic and could result potentially in, again, higher criminal legal fees or probation violations and revocations. So without that, that's not necessarily punishment for failing a test and having a drink and trying to drive. It is an offense because you did not manage a machine that I think from earlier testimony, I'm not following how it works and what it would require and what I would have to do in order to make it effective and useful in my car. Also, I agree as well that LSP does not have supervisory or supervision capacity or capability. Like, we have an Office of Probation and Parole, and we have probation and parole officers who are specifically tasked with that know how to communicate with the people that they're supervising, that build those relationships effectively with people. And this basically would have all of a sudden a state trooper calling a person saying, why haven't you started your car in 3 days? I'm not sure that that's going to have the anticipated deterrent effect for a person. And also, I would say that, just of a final note too, the idea of costs and the cost to the state, the cost to the individual that would have to install this, those costs that are mentioned are far outside the capacity for many individuals. And again, you're taking discretion away from a judge to determine indigency of a person, and the state police will form some form of administrative test to determine a person's eligibility to reduce those fees by 50%. But unfortunately, that reduction of 50% still puts this economically out of reach for many Louisiana families. We know 85% of defendants use or require a public defender. So you can see how if HB 633 were to go into effect, the impact then on those individuals to be mandated to have these interlock devices would all of a sudden just be impossible for them. Right? We know that there's the Louisiana Commission on Justice System Funding trying to reduce our user pay reliance in the criminal legal system. I think this bill is actually moving us in the opposite direction and continuing to require these usury fees on individuals that they just cannot pay. And if they can't pay them, they can never legally drive again in this state. Thank you.
Okay, in respect for time, we have to be on the House floor. So what we'll have to do is we have to go into recess, and we want to make sure that, respect everyone that is wishing to speak. So you come back immediately when the session is over.
Be very brief.
And we will have the discussion then. So right after we're done. Okay, well, I was told we can go a little longer until we're called. Go ahead, you can go ahead.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Will Harrell. I'm Policy Counsel, voice of the experienced. I think this is my first time to be in this committee as well, but every week I'm across the hall in the Criminal Justice Committee, and I want to talk globally. You've heard the very specific points, but before I say any more, I want to thank and honor the victims who have come here today, and your stories break my heart. I have 2 small boys, and if something like what you've experienced happened to you, I don't know if I'd have the strength to come here and advocate. So I really appreciate you, and mean no disrespect to any of you for the position that we have to take. I do not impugn your motives in any way. I know you're trying to help, but I do impugn the motives of the people who are not here right now, who are watching on their computers right now, and that's the manufacturers and the industry who stands to gain financially from this. This is what we refer to commonly as a parasite bill. It is a bill aimed at generating revenues for private companies, vendors, that prey upon the poor who are least likely to be capable of paying for the services that they provide. I've heard it say more than once in this committee that the manufacturers will bear the cost of this. If that were the case, they'd be here in opposition with us. They're not. I think a deal may have been made if we're talking about extending the length of time that this has to apply to people. I think they view this, and the lowering of the BAC, I think that they might stand to gain from this, and that's why they're not here. This bill smells like bacon. I think there's some bacon going to a corporate interest that's not in this room, and I'd love to hear from them at some point. We have to look at this in our criminal justice system. We're all familiar. We've had a lot of discussions since 2017 about mass incarceration, and this body has taken significant steps to address the historical development over time. But make no mistake, industries have taken note of that too, and they're moving in and they're diversifying. They're moving in to electronic monitoring. They're moving in to service provision for reentry. They're moving in for bail and things of this nature. There are profit motives at play. Make no mistake about it. The interests of the victims who came here today are not the interest of some people who are behind this legislation. We have created a system of fines and fees in this state that is far more problematic than any of us knew in 2017 when this body passed legislation to evaluate that, to create a system to allow the judge to assess an ability of a person to pay fines and fees before penalizing them for not being able to do so. That bill has not been implemented yet, but nevertheless, the will of the legislature was expressed. There is a Fines and Fees Commission right now. I sit on it. We're looking at these issues. I think that this matter should be deferred for further study. I would like to find a real solution for the victims in this room, not one that simply works for the vendor. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're done. I'm going to ask the author to come back to the table and close on this bill. But I did have several cards in opposition. I'm going to hold these cards. They're going to be in the records. So just wanted you guys to know that we do have these cards in opposition. Also, there was some cards from Michael Edgar with MAD, who also sent a card for information only. Lieutenant Robert Burns, who is here, who also gave, and Sergeant McCarty from Louisiana State Police is also here. All right. The author,
I guess I'm confused. I thought I heard us a few minutes ago say we're going upstairs. Are we closing?
Yeah, we're gonna close. We have time. I haven't gotten a call from the speaker just yet, so we should be able to close.
Members, there's a lot of things just said. I don't think we agree with most of them. We've had a lot of answers to some of the things that have been said. I'm gonna try to give you a few, but I think this is a decision. We're gonna take some steps to try to eradicate DWIs in this state and save people from dying or not. I understand people have issues with the fiscal note. That's what appropriations is for. I'll work with everybody, okay? I think the question is, are we going to take a step to be like other states?
Representative Wright, listen, in no way am I rushing you. If you think you need more time, we're willing to work with you immediately following.
Ready for a vote, Mr. Chair.
Okay,
I'm ready
all
for
right.
a vote.
No problem.
Look, I can sit here.
No problem. I was just told by the attorneys that we want to make sure that you guys get ample time to present the information. So if you need more time, as I was saying earlier, time is available.
I don't want any more time. I mean, all right. I can give you a couple answers to what was presented, or we can just say, listen, I'd appreciate your favorable passage, appreciate your vote. I understand everybody on the committee was briefed on this. I'll work with people. I mean, the people who just show up and bring up objections, I can't work with them beforehand, so I'm not going to sit here and try to answer everything. But I appreciate favorable passage, and we'll work with other people later. Thank you.
Do we have a motion? Okay, we have a motion by Representative Horton to move House Bill 633 favorably. Are there any objections? Seeing none, House Bill 6, is there any objections? House Bill 630.